Corvids are some of the smartest birds on the planet. In fact, maybe the smartest birds on the planet. We're not even talking about other planets because that's a whole different conversation. It's a lot more complex. Anyways, in fact, that corvids have not already become the feathered overlords of the world. Completely surprising. If I were going to plan a Pinky and the Brain level of world domination, I would recruit crows and ravens. So smart, could do so many things. Boom, world takeover. Probably sharing too much information. But the one thing about crows and ravens that many people struggle with, identification. So, as someone who has crows and ravens regularly here at the Flocking Around Roost, we're going to try to solve that issue. We're going to cover a few quick tips and tricks to some easy crow and raven separation, flight, on the ground, by sound, range and habitat, maybe some behavior tricks. We're going to cover it all. So stick around and give us I don't know. I was going to say like give us a crow, but I don't know. I don't know if that's actually, is that a thing? Give us a crow. Give us a crow. It's like giving us a like. So give us a like. Give us a like and not a crow. Because if you gave us a crow, you'd be like, crow, crow. No, you'd be caw, caw. Unless you were a fish crow, in which case you'd be like, caw, caw. And if you gave us a raven, you'd be like, eh, eh. Okay, you know what? Just give us a like and please subscribe to the channel and I'll stop saying such weird things. Maybe. When it comes to identifying common ravens and American crows in flight, it may seem like it is quite the challenge, but there are 2 to 3 simple clues we can use to separate these two quickly and easily. It's just a matter of practice, 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 getting it down and using it in the field and practicing it in the field and getting better at it in the field and just also going out in the field because sunlight's good for you, makes you happy. Okay, so what do you look for? Number 1, you want to look at those wings. So on the common raven, oftentimes the wings kind of have a backwards pointed appearance where they almost seem to be kind of curved backwards, whereas on the crow, the wings are fairly straight. Number 2 is the tail, and we will go into more focus on the tail later, but the common raven's tail is almost diamond-shaped or closer to coming to a point even when folded, whereas the American crow's tail is slightly rounded to flat in most instances, whether it's spread or folded. So, looking at the tail, looking at the wings, you can generally separate these two species just like that. Additionally, the common raven's tail, way longer. The American crow's tail barely sticks out beyond the wings, but that common raven tail is hefty. And you know what else is hefty? Trash bags. Terrible joke. The head and bill. So in flight on the common raven, the head and bill protrude and are obvious. If you can't really see much of a head or bill, you might want to consider American crow because the raven's head and bill are significant. Very, very significant. Now, the next one, and this is a big one, and it takes a lot of serious focus and maybe even a photo or two. The number of quote-unquote fingers you can see on the common raven versus the American crow. On the crow, generally you can see 4 feathers or fingers, while on the common raven, I almost said the common, see what's happening already, I'm starting to blend them together. On the common raven, you can see 5 obvious fingers. So it's the obvious ones, not the little, ones you can see here and there, but the obvious ones. So common raven, 5, American crow, 4. The tail shape of the American crow is very different from that of the common raven. When you see the American crow, when it's, spread to some extent, or even when it's folded and in flight, it is flat. Sometimes it can appear slightly rounded, but for the majority of it, it is very, very flat when compared to that of the common raven. The common raven's tail comes to a very distinct point. It's almost diamond-shaped at the end, and then when spread, has a very distinct arc to it because those central tail feathers are longer than the outer tail feathers. However, one note of caution, when feathers on the tail start to wear, tail shapes can appear very different than they would if the tails were not undergoing some sort of wear. So be very careful, consider all the possibilities when doing that. However, the majority of the time, you will be fine to think that the tail shape is accurate. If you didn't get the nares joke, the nares are the openings or holes there on top of the bill that birds use to breathe through. Hopefully you got that joke. Otherwise, that fell flat. But talking about nares in the bill, the bills of these two birds could not be more similar, but also more different. The raven has this honking bill. I mean, just massive compared to its head size. It's obvious. It protrudes extensively. It has a massive hook to it. It's thick. It's chunky. And yes, while it can look similar-ish to the American crow crow's bill is just more petite. And compared to its head size, it's not this massive object protruding from its skull. So when you see these two, check that bill size because it is a very critical piece of identifying them, especially when they're on the ground, because those bills are very, very different from each other. And again, that hook, look for that hook. Look for how wide it is on the face, how long it is protruding from the head. It is a significant bill, and with enough time and study, you should be able to easily pull crows and ravens apart just looking at their bills. The sound of the common raven, as you just heard, it sounds kind of gross. Sounds like someone, got some phlegm stuck in their throat. It's guttural, it's coarse, it's hoarse. And then when you hear the American crow, it sounds like a stereotypical Hollywood Western crow sound. And they might use it for ravens too, but the crow has a very traditional caw, caw, caw sound, whereas the raven has that, it sounds like they're choking on something, hacking up a bone or something. So while superficially they may seem similar, with enough practice and just bending your ear, if it sounds hoarse and rough, it's probably a raven. And if it sounds like a stereotypical caw, 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 then you likely have yourself a crow. When you compare the heads of these two corvids, the common raven has a blocky, angular head with really shaggy, full feathers around the throat. And, it kind of looks disheveled at times around its throat. Whereas the American crow has a cute, petite, roundish head with more put together or proper looking feathers around its throat. So, while these two are sitting on the ground, and you can observe these things up close, pay close attention to the overall shape and just the angular part of the head. And is it round and cute, or is it angular and sharp? And then are the feathers around the throat shaggy, or are they well put together and smooth? The range of the American crow versus the common raven doesn't really offer a whole lot of help unless you live in the extreme parts of North America. If you live in the northwestern part of North America, Alaska, or the southeastern part of North America, the Gulf states, and in some other southeast states, well then yeah, you might be able to use range to help you eliminate in your identification process, although ranges are expanding for both species. So if you live in Alaska and you see a dark corvid, it is probably a raven. And if you live in the southeastern states and you see a dark corvid, it is probably one of two species of crow, either the American crow or the fish crow. And we're not covering fish crow right now because there's a whole other issue. Some behavior things. Typically, crows, you're mostly going to see them in flocks, although there are instances where that is not always true. Whereas ravens, you'll often see them in pairs, and they're oftentimes playing on the wind, though I have seen flocks of crows where they appear to be playing in the wind. So behavior is not always super helpful, but combining behavior, range, and then a little bit of habitat, where ravens typically aren't going to be in as heavily treed areas, although sometimes they will be. But you're going to see them a lot more out in the open. Like I previously said, maybe playing up in the sky, doing acrobatics. However, that does not exclude crows. It's just a tendency you might see more in the common raven than the American crow. There you have it. Thank you so much for watching and maybe learning a little bit about separating the American crow and common raven in identification. Though maybe you didn't learn a thing and you hate us and you're never going to watch again. But even if that's the case, maybe give us a little subscribe, a little click on the old button there, just a little pity click. We will never say no to a pity click. That sounds weird. Pity click, pity click, pity click.